While the entire NBA community is laser focused on the NBA Finals, some of us Knicks fans are laser focused on July 1st. That's when NBA free agency gets underway. And of course, the pipe dream is one Kevin Durant and the Kyrie Irvings and Kawhi Leonards of the world. But what happens if the Knicks don't get one of these guys? What happens if the Knicks do get their hands on one of these guys? They're going to need some affordable free agents to join them. I'm your host, Nick Dais, here to talk about the Knicks and some of the affordable top free agents they can maybe get their hands on this summer once free agency gets underway. Before we get started, make sure you check me out at The Lamb Show on all social media outlets. And if you haven't subscribed already to Chat Sports TV on YouTube, that is youtube.com/Chat Sports TV. Let's take a look at the Knicks just as a franchise and what they're getting into this summer. Summer 2019, the New York Knicks have $72.9 million in cap space to fill out the entire roster. That is the most of all teams in the NBA when it comes to cap space. No one has more cap space than the New York Knicks. And they do have themselves room for not one, but two max contracts. Look, the pipe dream, like we said at the beginning of this video, is to get our hands on a guy like a Kawhi Leonard or Kevin Durant and maybe use that other max slot on like a Kemba Walker or a Kyrie Irving. But there are going to be a lot of other free agents that we're going to need to focus on maybe getting our hands off. So let's take a look at some of the players that are going to be under contract for the New York Knicks starting in 2019-2020 season. You look at Mitchell Robinson is due on the books for $1.5 million. Alonzo Trier for $3.5 million. Damian Dotson, $1.6 first round pick. Kevin Knox, $4.38 million. Dennis Smith Jr., who was acquired from the Dallas Mavericks in the Porzingis trade, along with those other first round picks from Dallas. He's on the books for $4.46 million. Frank Ntilikina, if he's going to remain on the team, there are some rumblings about him maybe getting shipped this offseason. He is on the books for $4.85 million. Emmanuel Mudiay, $5.75 million, and Lance Thomas, the grizzled vet, at $7.5 million. So before we get into the free agents, the affordable ones, I've cut it up into two different groups. The first group that you're going to see, the first bunch of names, is going to be the 3-and-D guys, the three-point specialists. And we'll get it started with one, Danny Green, who is currently on the Toronto Raptors, and he is a key to the Raptors' success all year. He brings that veteran's presence. He's a two-way guard. He's a three-point shooter. And most importantly, one of the things that I look at when you're going to get some of these free agents that aren't the marquee names, right? They're not the LeBron Jameses of the world. They're not the Anthony Davises. They're not those top tier upper echelon free agents. I want guys that could play in big games. And one thing I know about Danny Green, he's played around 20 NBA Finals games dating back to his time and his tenure with the San Antonio Spurs. Hell, there was an argument to be made that he was the most valuable player on one of those Spurs teams if it wasn't for LeBron James and the Heat stealing that Finals away from them. This guy is a deadly shooter. The big lights don't scare him. I need a guy that I know I'm down 5 points on the road in a crucial Game 5 2-2 series. Can I have you out there? Are you not afraid of the big moment? And Danny Green is one of those guys. Another guy that also is in this 3-and-D category is one JJ Redick, who's actually, surprisingly, this was a big shock to me when I was doing the research for this. He had his best statistical season as far as points per game goes with the 76ers. 18.1 points per game for the veteran guard, coming off a year in which he was sort of the forgotten son of that Sixers team. Look, we knew all about Embiid, trusting the process, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris got acquired right before, during the trade All-Star break. Jimmy Butler, also the big move that moved over there. And the forgotten guy was JJ Redick. He's a three-point sniper. We know about it. He's an absolute freak of nature when it comes to his conditioning. This guy just basically chases around the opposing player's wings, and he's just up and down the floor all the time, rolling off screens, similar to how Ray Allen used to play back in the day. And he's still producing at a high level. Look, he's coming off a career year. I think this is another guy that, a big moment. He's played big games pretty much his entire life, even going back to his time with Duke. People forget he was on that Magic team that went to the finals, and even with those Clippers teams. This has been a guy who can play in a big game take a big shot and he's not afraid of a big moment. For me, guys like him, guys like Danny Green are guys that I really want to get my hands on. Another guy who kind of wasn't in this tier or in this discussion as far as a guy who could play in a big spot or isn't afraid of a big moment is none other than Seth Curry. Yes, Seth Curry, the brother of one Steph Curry, I think is a good guy to spearhead your bench. A guy who comes off the bench could be a key factor in the second unit of your team. He proved himself this season with the Portland Trailblazers. Look, I know a lot of it could be that he was very accustomed to playing against his brother. I'm sure they must have played basketball and one-on-one against each other all through their time growing up. But it was something about him. He wasn't afraid of the big moment. He was asking for the ball when the games were on the line, even in the Nuggets series and against the Warriors too. And look, they did get swept. The Blazers did get swept by the Golden State Warriors. But it's important to remember that they were up in those games, and Seth Curry had a lot to do with that. In game 2, 3, and 4 of that Blazers and Warriors series, the Blazers had like 17-point leads in each of those games in the second half. It's just that the other Curry and the Golden State Warriors went absolutely bananas. So that's a guy who I think really proved himself this postseason as being able to play in big games and not being afraid of the big moment. That's a big thing for me with these affordable free agents. So let's put up a poll quick. Pick a 3-point specialist. Type S for Seth Curry, type D for Danny Green, and type JJ for JJ Redick. Let me see what you guys think in the comments below, and let's see who you guys would prefer from this grouping of 3-point specialists. Another guy on the list who really caught my attention, he was one of those guys that if you really watch the NBA over the last couple of years, he was never going to pop off the screen. He was never going to drop 30 points a game. He really just knew his job, and he did his job to the best of his ability, and he was very, very solid, in particular for that Rockets team just 2 years ago, the MVP season for James Harden. He was a key factor on the outside, and that's Luke Mbah-a-Moute, who ended his season with the LA Clippers with a injury, so he didn't close out the year, but he was with the Clippers last time we saw him. He's a 3-and-D guy. He is a defensive factor. He was one of the big reasons why the Rockets not only were so great offensively, because we know about the D'Antoni system with James Harden. D'Antoni is a point guard whisperer. That's why James Harden has elevated his game to the next level. But guys like Mbah-a-Moute and Trevor Ariza were key factors in having the Rockets as a top 10 defensive unit too, which is what you really needed for a D'Antoni-led team, because you knew you could score, but can you stop anyone? And one of the reasons why I think the Rockets kind of took a step back this year was because they didn't have a guy like Mbah-a-Moute. And if you remember, if you even go back to that season when the Rockets were up 3-2 on the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, and then Chris Paul went hurt, well, remember, Mbah-a-Moute had gotten hurt earlier in that regular season, and when he came back in the playoffs, he was not the same. He just missed too much time, and when he came back, he still had injuries carrying over into the playoffs. So a guy like Mbah-a-Moute, I think, is another guy who, once again, veteran experience, a guy who is not afraid of the big moment, and you could throw him on one of those big wings. And remember, there are a lot of good wing players that you're going to be playing in the Eastern Conference Finals. Guys like, we don't know if Jimmy Butler is going to come back, but you got Jimmy Butler if he stays with the Sixers. You got Ben Simmons, Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? There's a lot of good names out there that you're going to have to be concerned with, and you could throw a guy like Mbah-a-Moute to just contain him, because you can't really stop those guys. Last but not least, another name that I really like is Nikola Meritage. When he got acquired by the Milwaukee Bucks, I thought that was a game-changing acquisition. At the time, I called him the steal of the trade deadline, because he was a stretch four. He fit perfectly with Giannis, able to stretch out the floor. And if you're looking at what the Knicks have, they have a lot of guards that like to penetrate. Dennis Smith Jr., Emmanuel Mudiay. If they bring a guy like Kemba Walker or Kyrie Irving over to Madison Square Garden, you're going to need guys that are going to be able to open up the lanes for them and just be sharpshooters from the outside. And I think Meritage is that kind of player. And he was one of the reasons why the Bucks took the next step in the regular season when he did get acquired with them. And once again, similar to Mbah-a-Moute, this was a guy who got hurt during the season, and it kind of cost the Bucks, I think, because he was not the same player he was with Milwaukee in the playoffs like he was in the regular season. So these are just some of the names of affordable free agents. These are guys that They might command $8 to $9 million a season, but nothing too crazy where they'll be getting $20 to $25 million, because $25 million or higher is usually going to be reserved for your max guys. So look, I have a question for you fans. Pick 2 of these free agents to pair with one Kevin Durant. If the pipe dream is Kevin Durant and he occupies the 1 max contract for the New York Knicks going into next year, what are the other 2 names that you would be very, very satisfied with the Knicks landing? In my opinion, I would love a guy like Bo Amute. You would need a defensive guy on the outsides to cover some of these wing players. And I would love a guy like JJ Redick. I think the veteran presence JJ brings to the team, I think, is perfect, especially with him coming off a career year. Just add some more scoring. You can never get enough scoring in the NBA. With that being said, it's at The Lamb Show on all social media outlets. And make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/chatsportstv. And we'll catch you guys next time on the Knicks Report.